Kristen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Trevor.
This is exciting. I think you are the first Republican guest I've had in, wow, 6, 7 months.
Do I get a merit badge for bravery?
You can take anything you want from the studio, and you can take it with you. But your position is really interesting because you're not just a Republican, but you're a Republican pollster. As somebody who's constantly asking the questions, I'd love to get into your mind into what's happening in today's America. Like, so let's start because you specialize in this. I'd love to talk about the Republican Party. You've got the Republicans like Mitch McConnell, you know, the old Paul Ryan, John Boehner-ish kind of like old school vibe. And then you've got Trump Republicans. That's what it feels like to me. And it seems like it's gotten to the point where even somebody like Mitch McConnell is seen as a rhino. And I'd love to know, is that what's happening in the Republican Party, or is it even more complicated than that?
Well, the Republican Party is pretty split between people who think of themselves as Republicans first, and people who think of themselves first and foremost as Trump supporters. They're at the party, but they're mostly there because of Donald Trump. They're less interested in the GOP label. You used to see, even before Trump came on the scene, if you asked people, well, do you have a favorable or unfavorable view of the Republican Party? There were a lot of Republicans who would say they had an unfavorable view of the party because they viewed their own party leaders as being too weak, too willing to accommodate Democrats, etc. And that's part of why Donald Trump was able to come out of nowhere, surprise everybody, and win the Republican nomination in 2016. And that kind of stuck. Even today, when I ask Republican voters, what are the attributes they're looking for in a candidate? Having a personality like Donald Trump is actually toward the bottom of the list. But being willing to fight like Donald Trump, take the fight to the Democrats, that is actually toward the top of the list of what Republicans are looking for.
And it's interesting because I've seen a lot of Democratic voters complaining that they don't feel like their leadership fights enough to get what they want.
Democrats may be a decade behind where Republicans were, that there's going to be a fight within the Democratic Party for, does our party need to be focused on accommodating moderates, broadening our tent, or do you need to take power when you have it and use it to accomplish as much as possible on your agenda? That's what we're seeing play out on Capitol Hill right now.
So when you look at this fight that is happening within the Republican Party, for me, I often think that the polarization in America is in part created by the fact that you have two choices. And I've always thought if you have two choices, inevitably we are going to be enemies with each other. Whereas, like, let's say in sports, we can all choose our teams, and then at some point I go like, all right, Kristen, you've got your team, I've got my team as Trevor. We hate that team together, so we can team up and get something done. And I see that in politics, whether it's in South Africa or in any place that has a parliamentary system, you're forced to create coalitions and alliances to get to a common goal, but you don't have to be on the same team all the way through it. If there was some world where, for instance, say Trump has his own party, and then you have the traditional, whether the Marco Rubio Republican Party, and then you have the Democrats, which is the Joe Biden, but then you also have like the Bernie Sanders AOC Democratic Party. And just from what you've seen and what you've polled, how would people vote, and what would the lay of the land be?
So the Republican Party would probably look like, if we were in Europe, a combination of a traditional conservative party, your Tories in the UK, and a sort of further right, more populist, anti-immigration type party. And you've got those in a number of different European countries as well. And the GOP is pretty split evenly between those two viewpoints. The Democratic Party, meanwhile, most Democrats tend to fall into that Labor Party type camp, more of a center left. But the youngest Democrats are pretty split between that and a Green Party type vision. And then, of course, you've got this little piece in the middle, which are the sort of fiscally conservative but socially progressive, more libertarian types. There's not very many of them in the electorate. They tend to be really overrepresented in business and media and my friend group, but there's just not that many out there. But they tend to vote more Democratic than Republican. So that's what the coalitions would look like. But overwhelmingly, between the voters in both of those coalitions, they vote 80+% partisan-wise the way you would expect. So both the populists and the conservatives, they're voting Republican in almost the same measure. So even though if we split into 5 parties, it would be really fascinating and you'd have all sorts of deal making, you would still, I think, have this pretty binary coalition that would still form.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Well, then if it would be binary, then maybe this next question will help me understand some of the issues America faces. And that is, because you are one of the few Republicans who I have the privilege of speaking to, I'd love to know, from your perspective, what is it about Republicans that people don't understand? And I don't mean like the think pieces in the New York Times, like what you don't get about why this man is racist. I don't mean that. I mean, I meet many people who go, I'm Republican. And they go like, oh no, I believe in gay rights. I believe that, you know, gay people can get married. And I also believe in this, and I believe in, and I go like, whoa, this seems like a blurring of what I thought Republican meant. So what is it you think that broadly Democrats don't understand about a person who says, I'm Republican?
I think there's an assumption that once you put that label on, that you are signing up for all of the policy positions that are on a party's platform that they adopt at a convention.
Okay.
And that is not the case. To your point about, well, what if we had 5 parties? I mean, there are a lot of people in the US that have really different views on issues than what the party label is that they wear. And so you have a lot of Republicans who might hold, they might say, hey, I think climate change is a real problem. I don't love the Green New Deal, but I want to do something about it.
And we've seen that with younger Republicans.
Exactly. And so I think there's a lot of assumption. It's easy on your own side to say, well, we've got a lot of different people in our tent. But on the other side, they're all the same. And that's just not true. In polling, we often fall into this trap of looking at things in terms of, well, this group is a monolith and that group is a monolith because we're breaking things down demographically.
Yes.
But it is true that I've rarely seen Republicans 100% agree on pretty much anything. And the same thing with Democrats, too.
Do you think then the polarization is less about the parties and then maybe more about the fact that the parties themselves have chosen to only take one thing? Sometimes I feel like in American politics, you remember in school when you were picking like your team to play with, and then you'd be like, all right, I picked Barry, and I picked John, I picked Amy, and I picked Emily, and it was like, and that's all you can have. Sometimes when I look at American politics, I think of that, I go, why is it that Democrats don't seem to want to claim like the finances? They don't want to claim the economics world of things. It seems like it's mostly social. And then on the Republican side, I don't see them trying to think about like, oh, okay, how would we fix immigration, not just shut down immigration? Is there something in that? Has politics gotten to a point where now people claim one side and so the other team has to claim the opposite side, as opposed to presenting, I guess, differing ideas on how to fix the same issue?
Well, it's definitely the case that take someone like Donald Trump was able to polarize people on an issue just by taking a position on it. So
yes.
An issue like Russia is a perfect example where Republicans used to view Russia as a threat and Democrats thought, not so much. And as soon as we got past the 2016 election, Democrats said Russia is our #1 adversary, and Republicans said, I don't really think about them as much anymore. So, people can suddenly adapt their views to what's going on and where leaders stand. But I think our polarization is much less about where people stand on issues, because to the earlier point, lots of people believe things that don't all fit neatly into one bucket. They take some from column A and some from column B. Our polarization instead is about a feeling of being under threat. That Democrats today feel very under threat from Republicans. They worry that Republicans are going to roll back voting rights. They worry that Republicans want to take retrograde positions on cultural issues. And at the same time, Republicans worry that Democrats want to radically change America. And so the other thing that I think has driven Republicans to gravitate toward a figure like Donald Trump and this desire to just fight is that Republicans see themselves as losing influence, not just in Hollywood or academia, where Republicans have always complained they don't have power, but even in, say, big business. It used to be, not 10 years ago, was Republicans were the party of big business. And now Republicans complain that they think big brands, sort of seeking younger consumers, are moving to the left culturally.
Right.
You've also got tech, for instance. About 10 years ago, tech wasn't necessarily partisan, but Republicans nowadays sort of love to say, look, big tech is against us. And it's that sense of feeling under threat that I think leads a lot of Republicans to look for someone like Donald Trump, who they say will fight for them.
So do you think the split came with Donald Trump? Because I remember a point where right before the primaries, right before the race really began, right? Obama was leaving, and so the race was wide open. And I specifically remember Republicans saying, guys, we need to appeal to voters of color. We need to appeal to Hispanic voters. We need to get out there. We need to change. Women need to be in our ranks. We need to get out there and then Donald Trump came and that just disappeared, and it seemed like the strategy was like, oh no, we're just going to galvanize what we already have and get out the silent majority, and that's all we're looking towards. Has that become the shift, and do you think that will just continue to be the path of the Republican Party for the near future?
I think everybody loves a winner. And so for Republicans, they saw Donald Trump pulling off something that Mitt Romney hadn't, that John McCain hadn't. And so, okay, even if they personally are not stylistically Donald Trump-ish or didn't really like him that much, he put a W on the scoreboard, and I think that changed a lot of Republicans' minds. And that's part of why he is fighting so hard to make this case, to claim that he didn't lose the 2020 election, because for him, his power is entirely wrapped up in the idea of Republicans thinking, well, that's a guy who knows how to win. So the question is, if Donald Trump is now no longer in office, and he's not running for office at least in 2022, Are there other Republicans who can put W's on the scoreboard by doing something a little bit different and give the party a different model for, okay, we tried that. It worked this one time.
Right.
It didn't work in 2020. Now let's try something different. I think Republicans will gravitate toward a new strategy if a new strategy can prove that it can win at the ballot box.
Well, Kristen, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And good luck. I know the midterms are going to start ramping up, and you're going to be out there asking everyone every type of question. Hopefully, we'll have you back on again to help explain some of it.
Thank you so much.
Be sure to check out The Selfie Vote. It's a really fascinating book. And listen to The Trend Line with Kristen Soltis Anderson on SiriusXM.